All right, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome back, returning listeners. Shout out, returning listeners. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We have another great guest today. Full lineup of guests this summer. We're just kind of getting started, only on episode 2, but we got some great guys, especially today. Jeff Mueller. We're going to talk about injuries. We have a doctor of physical therapy and fantasy football injury analyst coming on. And I'm sure you guys, if you're on Twitter, you're following him. If you're not following him, I don't know what you're doing. Make sure you take care of that. At JM Thrive PT. You're going to find him there. You're going to find a lot of his stuff through Twitter. He's very active. Great follow. Definitely recommend following him there. How you doing today, my friend? Glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. We've interacted a ton on Twitter, so it's good to finally be on a show and have a good conversation today.
Yeah, so first I want to just kind of ask people a little about your background. Just talk to me about what you do for work regarding injuries, what got you into the fantasy football space.
Yeah, so I've been a physical therapist for 10 plus years now. And even before that, I played fantasy football since I was probably in 6th or 7th grade. So I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed sports. I played sports a ton. And then just getting into, I think I started around COVID time. My wife was actually the one who encouraged me, hey, you should get into a hobby. And so she says I cheated a little bit, though. I turned my work into a hobby, but it still counts. It still counts in my opinion. It's been a ton of fun. I've realized how many people really want information on injuries, and I have the knowledge, so I love being able to share it.
I lost you there for a second, but looks like we got you right back in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
Yep, you're there though. All right, I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. So we just got you on. All right, don't worry about that. Little technical difficulties that happens. We're human. All right, so yeah, I love how the wife gave you encouragement for that.
Yep.
It was the worst if you would have to fight it, and you gotta, scale back. The wife doesn't want you doing too much, but that's great that you have a supportive partner as well. Love to hear that. So let's talk a little bit about injuries in general, because right in the fantasy space, what do we care about? When it comes to injuries, we care about the players who are quote unquote injury prone. We want to know, is injury prone is a thing? Like, which players are injury prone? Which players aren't? Which players do we avoid? Which players, do we ignore the previous history? So that term gets kind of applied pretty loosely by people who a lot of time might not necessarily know what they're talking about in terms of it. So what comes to mind for you when you hear that term, injury proneness? What do you think of, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think it exists, but like you said, I definitely think it gets overused. It really, to me, all these cases wind up being very individualized. So you have to look at them, well, actually, in a bucket position wise, I would say the running back position as a whole is probably injury prone, just given, how many hits they take and all that. But then you look at specific players, someone like Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, you could probably say he's injury prone, but then you look at all of his specific injuries. It's not like they tie in together, injury to injury, compared to someone like, actually, we'll talk on him, Kenneth Walker. Like someone like him, I would actually say is injury prone when it's the same type of injury over and over again. Kind of like T. Higgins or Christian Watson, guys you can think of as like, man, if he's going to have an injury, he's most likely going to have a hamstring injury because of his past injuries. That's exactly what they've been struggling with. So that's where I fall into the bucket of these specific players are injury prone, but it is often overutilized. And then
Yes.
even on the injury analyst side, I've seen some injury analysts say, well, injury prone doesn't exist. But to me, like when we're saying week to week, when we're saying you should avoid this player because they have moderate to high injury risk, aren't we essentially saying that, well, that player is prone to injury this week, so I would avoid him?
Yeah, and some of the guys you mentioned, like Kenneth Walker and T. Higgins, who you mentioned, you think are injury prone. I think that's more of the soft tissue injuries. And I think there's kind of agreement within at least the casual space that kind of those tend to be more prone guys who've had soft tissue injuries in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong, are more likely to have them in the future. Are there any other like types of injuries that you think are recurring that like you really, when you see it once, you're like, oh, I think that could probably happen again off the top of your head?
Yeah, actually, we'll talk on one of them, but like back injuries, disc injuries. I mean, you think especially with DBs like Caleb Farley, did a profile on him coming out of the draft, and sure enough, he's been struggling in the NFL because of back injuries. We'll talk on Michael Pittman. Um, yeah, there's a couple. I mean, and then there's other ones that kind of indirectly lead to other injuries like turf toe. I don't think Malik Neighbors is on the list. I'm not honestly concerned on him, but injuries like that, where in my mind it goes to biomechanics. Some of these injuries lead to a player moving differently, and tissue is going to be utilized differently in their movement patterns. So it leads to compensatory injuries. I don't think a lot of people think through that as they're thinking about injuries.
Yeah, and the one you mentioned there was Michael Pittman, and we can talk about him now. We'll jump all over the show.
Sorry.
We don't have to go in
Sorry.
order necessarily. It's all right. But yeah, because that's an interesting one to me. We talked about Michael Pittman with the back injury last year, and he's a guy who I've been drafting a decent amount of, so I very much would like to talk about him. So you talk about the back injuries being recurring. That kind of concerns me about how much I've been drafting Michael Pittman. But also another question I would have was we talk about Michael Pittman and he didn't have back surgery. So is that kind of that a good thing where it's like, okay, maybe it's not that major, or is it maybe like, do you want to see back surgery? So like, what's your thoughts on that?
So honestly, it really depends on what the actual injury is. Which, of course, with his situation, we don't have specific details on what exactly it is. It could be a fracture in his back, could be a disc herniation, could be if it's disc oriented. And this is the hard part with some of these injuries is we'll probably never know unless sometimes like I think of J.K. Dobbins going on the interview and actually giving details on, oh, well, it wasn't just ACL, even though John Harbaugh said it was ACL only. It wasn't just ACL, it was hamstring, it was meniscus, it was et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes we never know what the exact injury is. So like for Pittman, I do have some concerns there if it's disc oriented because they just don't heal very well. And there's often a lot of long-term concerns there. But if it's like a spondylolisthesis, like something where the vertebra is fractured, you can play through that. With minimal long-term concerns. It's just short-term pain management. So he's actually, I was going to talk on that down, later on in the notes, but he's one that I kind of struggle with. I'm part of me, given his cost, is fine investing. Part of me kind of I would just diversify to make sure I don't have too much of him in case it goes wrong.
Yeah. The problem is he's just so damn cheap. It's like once he's off the board, I'm like, all right, I'm drafting Rashad Bateman. Luther Burden's now falling, who's like another guy.
Yeah, and
I guess we could talk about him. Are you concerned about for him injury wise? I mean, he's already missing practice. I don't think he's on the list.
Yeah, I honestly.
Any thoughts on him?
That's actually. I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of covers a big bucket of some of these preseason or camp or OTA injuries, where oftentimes these players will deal with soft tissue injuries because of ramp up periods, especially rookies because they're not used to the camp, they're not used to the intensity yet, and they're just getting involved into NFL. We saw it with I think Jahmyr Gibbs had a hamstring strain his rookie season in camp. So I'm not necessarily concerned on the injury itself leading into the NFL season, but for early production, I'm concerned about the fact that he's not getting the reps and the practice and the timing and everything with Caleb Williams, who struggles with timing. That part I would be more concerned about, but not necessarily the injury itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll bring it back to kind of before we get too much into just the players, and we talked a little bit about like the injuries that concern you, and you mentioned like reoccurring back and disc injuries. Those are concerning. Like, what other injuries do you find the most concerning for players, or maybe the least concerning, and also kind of gauging that in relation to other people, like maybe where it's an injury where you see the public freak out about it and you're like, oh, that's not a big deal, those injuries don't matter, or maybe vice versa where it's like the public doesn't care and you're like, hey, you better watch out for this injury, like you should listen to me, listen to what I'm talking about. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say most concerning, honestly, as I was coming up with this list, it's kind of position based, honestly. Like for running back, most concerning would be high ankle. It really alters, it really impacts how they move, and it's going to impact their efficiency, impact, pretty much everything in their game. Shoulder, especially throwing shoulder for quarterback, that's most concerning for quarterbacks. That's why I'm concerned about like Anthony Richardson. Daniel Jones is probably going to start all or majority of the season, which actually that part, oddly enough, makes me okay with Michael Pittman. Yeah, aside from that, I mean, multi-ligament injuries, obviously that's a concern. We'll talk on a little bit of that with like Brandon Ayuk and then Nick Chubb. Most overrated, honestly, are probably in the bucket of, thinking like Christian McCaffrey type injuries, like a PCL sprain that's non-surgical. People are going to freak out about it because it's a ligament. He's missed so many games in this past. Obviously, that's going to be the first thing you think about. But, PCL sprains have minimal long-term concern, especially after 6 months. And then stuff like tendinopathies, like Achilles tendinopathies, they go away. I don't think people understand that those heal. And they can fully go away where they're not an issue long term. So that's all part of my process as I go through some of these injuries where someone might see like, oh, Achilles, that's going to be really bad. Well, not necessarily. It depends on what it is. As long as it heals, he's good. And currently, like Christian McCaffrey's case, he's good right now.
Yes or no? Are you drafting Christian McCaffrey at ADP in 2025?
Yeah. So you asked me this a month ago. I'm like, for sure, he's round 2 ADP. I looked 2 days ago and he's like 108, 109. So he's crept back up there. In my opinion, honestly, his low end outcome is like 14 to 15 fantasy points per game. His high end outcome is still 22 to 24, right? So it really makes you think like, man, I think I would. But honestly, if I'm sitting there, I think 108, 109 cost right now. I would still be considering guys like BTJ, Neighbors, maybe Nico, maybe Amon-Ra, even though the offensive change, Ben Johnson's gone. Maybe Ashton Janty. Probably Ashton Janty just because of, they're going to really lean on the run. So that probably pushes CMC to 12 to 14 range, which at that point I'm smashing.
Yeah. So another player you mentioned and topic you mentioned was the multi-ligament tears. You brought up Brandon Ayuk and brought up Nick Chubb. So one question I have there would be, we talked about the severity of injuries, where not only did Brandon Ayuk have the ACL tear, he also had, I believe, what was that, MCL tear. So how much worse is that, when a player tears their MCL in addition to ACL? Is that something where it's like, oh, everybody's freaking out and it's not as big a deal that the MCL was there? Or is it like, oh, the two of them together is like he's a hard avoid for 2025? So it's like, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so honestly, I would say the MCL, it really depends on severity. So like thinking like a Joe Burrow situation years ago when he had ACL and MCL, he had his MCL repaired, right? Brandon Ayuk, we don't have specific details. It's been reported ACL and MCL in surgery. But again, the wording has been very vague on, was the MCL actually repaired? Did it actually require surgery? Because the MCL, I don't think people realize the MCL is really thick and has a big blood supply, so it heals really well on its own. And that's often why you see some of these players have surgery delayed for a month, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, to let the MCL itself heal and scar a little bit prior to the ACL being done. So I would love more information. Again, kind of like what we talked about with Michael Pittman. Sometimes we don't find out these details. If you told me he did have his MCL repaired, I actually would be avoiding Ayuk at cost. As of right now, I've seen videos of his movement patterns. I've seen pictures of him. He actually looks like he's in good shape. He's moving. He has full extension. His quad looks pretty darn good. We just haven't seen the videos like we've seen with Stephon Diggs where he's running routes and catching passes. If you told me right now, MCL healed on its own, that's why his surgery was delayed. I think it was like 21 days or 24 days or something like that. If it was ACL only, I'm buying him at cost with the thought of like, there's actually a chance that he's active week 1. And I know those reports have come out that, well, he's starting on PUP. People see that and assume he's starting the season on PUP. That's not a guarantee. He's starting camp on PUP, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be reverted from active PUP to reserve PUP for week 1. So best case scenario, he's active week 1. If it's ACL only, I do think he there's a chance, he misses the first 4 weeks and then he's active week 5. But yeah, if the MCL was repaired, then I'd be out on that situation.
Okay, good to know. So another one you brought up was most concerning for running backs, and I'm going to again skipping around the list a bit here. You said would be like those lower ankle, like or high ankle,
High ankle,
me.
yeah.
Yeah, it would be like the high ankle. So another guy who comes to mind would be Isaiah Pacheco, where that was a fibula, and we talk about Tony Pollard trying to pattern match here, where kind of he was not very effective the first year returning it, but maybe was more effective in his second year back. So is that similar to high ankle in that, because it's kind of the same areas? And are we thinking maybe Isaiah Pacheco is going to be, in a much better form this year? What are your thoughts on him and that kind of injury?
Yeah, that's exactly how I view those. Of even though it was fibula repair, pinned in surgery, I kind of view them kind of like a tightrope procedure, where first year you kind of assume close to a 25 to 30% regression in efficiency, which we saw pretty close with Pollard. And Pacheco, as we saw when he returned, he was struggling big time. I think he was decent game 1, and then just because the recovery is not going to be as good each week, he just slowly gets worse and worse. But I think going into year 2, you're getting significantly further away from surgery itself and more recovery. I do anticipate he returns closer to his pre-injury self this year. I think the main question with him is what's his role. I would think Kansas City's going to lean on him as the running back 1, with maybe eventually Brashard Smith as like the pass catching option. But none of those guys like Elijah Mitchell and I'm blanking on who
Speaking
else.
of injury prone.
Yeah. Which apparently he's looked pretty good, and he's out of the Niners system, so maybe he stays healthy finally. Yeah. Probably not, but he is one of those that definitely falls under injury prone. But yeah, I think Pacheco would be one of those guys that I would expect, if you're betting on him for this year, I think you can expect his efficiency to be very close to what he was pre-injury.
Yeah, and even though I like Brashard Smith as a versatile weapon out of the backfield, he's still around 7th pick. Like the odds of him making a significant impact are not high. So they really didn't bring in anybody. They brought back Kareem Hunt, who's just obviously old. Elijah Mitchell taking a flyer on him. So I think there's a lot of upside for Pacheco personally. I've been drafting him a lot late. I think he's one of those last clear starters available in best ball drafts. So I like him this year.
Now I did see one thing on Kareem Hunt where, and it makes sense from a conditioning standpoint. Last year, I think he joined the team pretty late, right? Maybe in August or something, or September. Or no, maybe it was after Pacheco's injury.
Yeah, he wasn't there to start the season.
Yeah. So he actually struggled, kind of similar conditioning-wise, recovery-wise. He was struggling week to week as the season went on. He was talking this year just being available in OTAs and camp and off-season workouts. He feels like he's in much better shape. Obviously, we hear that with some players, and it's okay, it's just player speak, But there's a chance that he actually is more efficient going into this year. It can actually explain some of his deficiencies last year.
Yeah, and even efficiency issues aside, Kareem Hunt, they'll use him as a goal line back. So I like him as a round 18 best ball dart throw. I don't mind him. It's still a great offense, and I would bet on Kansas City being even better this year than they were last year. Getting Rashee Rice back. I think there's upside for them to be, obviously a top 5 offense again any year with Patrick Mahomes. So I like taking a shot at either Kansas City running back. I think they're both priced pretty cheap. I mean, you're getting round 18 for a handcuff and one of the best offenses in the league. So I like that. We'll bring it back to the top, though. Let's talk about a guy who's priced really at the top of the drafts, where we talk about injury concerns, maybe not McCaffrey, but we talk about the wide receiver position. That'd be Puka Nacua, who has been just lights out, especially you look at the per route numbers. He is, people are predicting maybe he's going to be the wide receiver 1 this year, ahead of Jamar Chase, if he stays healthy. He could be that productive. But how concerned are we about the injuries? And, because this also really goes back to college for him, where he missed some time there. So, are we just penciling in Puka Nacua is going to miss, 4+ games every season at this point, or 3+, whatever it may be?
Yeah, he's definitely in that range where even if he misses 2-3 games, I want him on my team. I'm actually totally fine drafting him at cost. I think he's like 1.6, 1.7. I think I was looking at the ADP. I guess I was looking at best ball, so it might be a little different for redraft, etc.
But
But
that's all we really have now. It's really early for redraft season, so we got to kind of
yeah,
go off best ball for now.
yeah. The two I would maybe consider over Nakua would be Brian Thomas Jr. and Neighbors. Aside from that, it's like and it's funny. Earlier today, a bunch of graphs were popping up from like Data Roma and Fantasy Points Data. Puka Nakua is just breaking every single chart that you look at. It's like elite. Looking at Fantasy Points Data suite, he was first in targets per route run, first in yards per route run. Targets, even with Cup getting 8.1 a game, Puka was getting 9.5. First read percentage 34.8%. So it's like I look at all that. I'm not using Devontae Adams as a reason to fade Puka Nakua at cost. I'm not using the injuries either because again, I think his play style leads to some concern, kind of like George Kittle. Play style concerns. He's very physical when he has the ball. He breaks tackles. He always fights for more yards. It puts him at risk of taking these hits where probably unnecessary hits, but it puts him at risk for an injury. But even if he absorbs an injury, misses 2 to 3 games, when he's healthy, you know what you're gonna get. You're gonna get elite production. So he's one that I'm drafting. And even if you want to use Devontae Adams as a reason, I don't know your thoughts on this, but I think Devontae Adams could also be a wide receiver one this year.
Yeah, I'm in on Devontae, and we talk about him taking the Cup run. Cup's not on the sheet, but I feel like I have to ask about him now. Like, is Cooper Cup cooked? Is he done, or is he still good? Like, what are your thoughts on Cup? Because he put up some big games last year, despite the fact you look at his reception perception profile, his numbers were way down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that would indicate that he's a declining player. But he also had some huge games. It's also a good system for him. But and he's pretty cheap this year. I've drafted a decent amount of Cup as well, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned level of cookedness 1 to 10. Like how cooked is Cooper Cup?
I don't think. I mean,
Is he medium rare? Is he well done? He's thoroughly cooked.
well, I know someone's going to ask in the comments, like, oh, has he retired yet? Because that's been an ongoing joke for like 3 years now. And some people know why. But I mean, even last year, again, 8.1 targets, 31.7% first read percentage. It's like, is that a product of Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, or is it Cup earning targets? I think him going into Kubiak's system, he's likely the slot right over JSN. JSN probably pushes out wide, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more Cup in the slot. I think you'll see a little bit of both, but you're
Yeah,
going to see, I think JSN has more outside capabilities than Cooper,
yeah,
especially at this stage of their career.
yeah. So I mean, I don't think injury wise he's been able to stay healthy. The sciatic nerve issue seems to have been fixed. He went to Minnesota, had that fixed. Marshawn Lloyd was another person who went to Minnesota. Um,
Oh, I drafted
the
so
T
much Lloyd
Higgins.
last year. I would love to see some Lloyd this year.
Yeah, after he got 20 touches last year,
Oh, that was
if
tough.
that. But yeah, I think Cooper Kupp at cost. Honestly, I do think he's going to be one of the key factors in Seattle's offense and probably Sam Darnold's main target there out of the slot. I don't think he's cooked, but I think given his age, I think there's some separation issues and just athleticism reduction. But again, given I view him more kind of like an Adam Thielen, where they're more tacticians versus relying on pure athleticism.
All right. Well, let's keep it on the old veteran wide receivers. Like Tyreek Hill, is he cooked? Like, what's the deal with Tyreek Hill? Are we in on him in 2025? He's got a super high, just like Cutman. His more recent season was just the year before, where he was, top 5 wide receiver. So Tua missed a few games last year. Obviously, I know he's got the wrists. It's tough to tell with these players that are speed based as they get older. Like, how worried are we about Tyreek Hill? In terms of injuries, in terms of 2025. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's if anything, I'm not concerned on the wrist at all. Those have very low long term and recurrent issues. He's coming off his second surgery, I think, to remove the pin after the first one. But yeah, if any injuries to pop up, I'd be more concerned, given his age, on soft tissue like hamstring, especially as a speedster. But overall, looking at his profile, looking at how many games he's been healthy aside from, contract / bad season / wrist stuff, Tua being out, nothing really strikes me as like a red flag.
Yeah, and I like Tyreek Hill. He's getting him in the 3rd round this year, so I'm drafting a little bit of him. What about Chris Godwin? Like we talk about his was not anything. It's not an ACL. Like it was a fractured ankle. How much better is that than an ACL? I mean, we talk about obviously ankles being a concern for running backs. Like, what's the concern for Chris Godwin in terms of him returning to pre-injury form? Is he going to be that exact same dude who we lost, halfway through last season, or is he going to be a reduced version of himself?
Yeah, I don't think he'll be exactly himself. But again, looking at pre-injury, he was technically, fantasy point-wise, he was wide receiver 2 overall, right? It was like 19.2 fantasy points or something.
Just behind Chase.
Yeah. So even, I think he can absorb. My main concern with him would be if he wasn't returning to his role as slot wide receiver there. And by every account, it sounds like he is going to be returning to the slot with Amika out wide, or maybe they interchange him a little bit more. But that actually reduces, I was looking into that yesterday, that reduces a lot of my concern on coming off the injury. I don't think it's going to be ankle dislocation only. Most likely, even though they didn't report this, most likely there was some ligament damage. So I do kind of put him in the bucket of like Tony Pollard coming off that injury that he was coming off of. So year 1, I would expect some efficiency regression, probably less yak. But again, given his role in slot, puts him at somewhat of an advantage against some matchups where he should be able to get decent amount of targets and be like a solid floor option. But I don't think we're going to see that ceiling like 19.2 fantasy points per game.
Yeah, I think definitely Ibuka's he's gonna take something. He's gonna.
He's too good.
Yeah, he's gonna be good. I like him at cost. I like all 3 Bucks wide receivers, but Mike Evans is the only one who's like priced way up. So I'm just gonna be drafting more Godwin, more Ibuka.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, it's like Godwin's cost. He's right around Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, James Conner, some of these running backs. I was like, man, I kind of want those running backs,
Yeah.
And even like
Kenneth Walker, Kamara, I'm drafting a ton there at that spot.
Yeah.
Talk about Kamara, I guess. Like, do you have any concerns with him injury-wise falling off the cliff? I know he's not on the list, but people are, starting to say, he misses time. He's always out in the fantasy playoffs. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, he's a running back. He gets used a ton. Anytime a player like that is there, I mean, we're probably gonna run into the same issue with Saquon Barkley. Like some people will start talking about that with the 400 touch ordeal. But yeah, Alvin Kamara. I mean, by all accounts, him and Chris Olave, they're likely going to be the main targets out of the Saints offense and the key cogs used by Kellen Moore. So I'm putting injury concerns aside on them and betting on them at cost just because of the upside that they could produce.
Yeah, and that's exactly the next guy I was going to talk about. When we talk about Chris Godwin and talk about the alternatives, going right next to him in ADP would be Chris Olave, who obviously had a great rookie season, was definitely a letdown in year 2. Now we have multiple concussions. What are your thoughts on the multiple concussion issue? Because that's kind of something we saw with Tua, but then again, like we saw that with Pat Freiermuth before, and nobody really talks about that with him anymore. So to me, I like buying Olave. I think he's priced down enough. I like him more in Dynasty, I feel like, than redraft, just because redraft, I want to take those running backs a little bit more. Yeah. But I'm not too concerned with the concussions. Am I crazy? Like, I'm not really worried about that. Like, I don't think it's a huge concern. Am I nuts for saying that?
No. So you asked earlier on overvalued or over. I forget what specifically you asked, like term wise, but
most concerning, least concerning.
Yeah. So many people. I mean, you'll see it on Twitter right now too. It's like everyone views concussions as like, oh, I don't want to touch him. I have Chris Olave in one league, and I was looking to tier up from him. And people are like, oh, I don't want Chris Olave. He's dead. He's got a mushroom.
He's one hit away from retirement.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, he could be, volume-wise, the cheapest potential wide receiver 1 or high-end wide receiver 2 at cost, if he stays healthy. And nothing. Okay, so if you're concerned about concussions, I would encourage you to look up neuroplasticity and understand that the brain does heal. Um, for anyone out there listening to this, I mean, we see examples like Tua. Did Tua have a concussion last year? No. After all those concerns, right? He had what, 3 in a 3 month span or something like that. No concussions last year. Brandon Cooks, he had 5. Everyone counted him out as dead, and then he's produced, I think, 4 or 5 straight seasons now, and he's actually teammates with Olave now. So especially in Dynasty, I'm buying Chris Olave.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't find that it's tough, especially with those concussions, man, because like you said, like there can be guys who get them a lot and then they just go the rest of their career and it's not an issue. Brandon Cooks is another example who came to mind for me where obviously he put up multiple 1,000-yard seasons after those issues. So I think you got to buy Chris Olave. Obviously, a separate concern is going to be the quarterback play in New Orleans. Like we got Tyler shucking the ball back there and God knows what else. Like I don't know what they're going to do. Trade for Kirk Cousins. Who knows? It's not looking very good at New Orleans quarterback play. I guess that's one reason maybe I should draft a little bit less Kamara. But yeah, I think they're priced down enough. I like the Saints still. Now let's talk about
especially for Kamara. I mean, looking at the quarterback play, doesn't that make you think they're going to lean even more on Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, he's their best player easily on offense. Yeah. They need to give him the ball. So let's talk about wide receivers when we're on the topic. Let's talk about Fat Debo. How much does a pneumonia affect the play? How much do you believe that was the leading reason for his decline last year? Or is he just fat and washed? What's the deal with
that? I think he was already definitely struggling from a conditioning standpoint and staying in shape standpoint, where the pneumonia basically just exacerbated the issue. I think we're going to see some of those issues this year. Now, in terms of just having him, I don't really want him in best ball or redraft, just because again the bucket that he's in right now, the players around him, it's like I find reasons. Pretty much every play, honestly, like 12 players down, to pick someone else. But if you have him in Dynasty, I wouldn't just cheap sell him. I would at least keep him, because looking at the role that they traded for him for, like the Diami Brown, Ollie Zacharias role, they designed specific screens for those players, and they just would not work. Like it fits his skill set perfectly opposite Terry McLaurin, where he'll at least, even if he gets 4 or 5 touches a game, like it's intriguing enough to keep him in Dynasty, where you're probably going to trade him for, I don't know, too cheap, where you might as well hold him if you're a contender. You know?
Yeah, he's an interesting one where you mentioned that, where there's such like a disconnect, because the redraft community, they think Debo's going to have a good year. He's priced up pretty damn high. Then Dynasty, it's like, he's done. He's washed. Yeah. It's over. Like, you're not touching this guy with a 10-foot ball. He's like 13th round starter pick. Like, all right, whatever. He's like my wide receiver 7.
And he's on a 1-year deal, and Washington probably doesn't re-sign him. But, well, they might, because, again, he fits. They have a specific role in mind for him, and he honestly just fits that role perfectly. Like,
talk about that role too, and there's a tweet from Dwayne McFarland. You guys will have to look it up, because I don't have it handy. You have to scroll through Dwayne McFarland's tweets, because the Twitter search function doesn't freaking work ever since he bought it. All right, excuse my tangent. But anyways, he tweeted this not too long ago, so it's a recent tweet in Dwayne's timeline about Debo's fit there in terms of Cliff Kingsbury's play call, in terms of the number of plays per game in the NFL. They were like top 5 in plays. They were like top 5 in wide receiver screen targets. They were top 5 in wide receiver rushes. So it's like they want that guy to do those things, and now they're bringing in Debo to do those things. Whether he's fat and washed is another question. But, you know, it's been hot up here in, you know, the Northeast. I'll tell you, I'm in New England right now. It's 100 degrees. Maybe I don't know what it's like down in Washington, but maybe it's hot and it's gonna, you know, Debo's gonna shell a little bit, and he's gonna come back down to, you know, to maybe 250 instead of, you know, 280. Who knows? But, I don't know. I don't love him in redraft, but Dynasty, I think I just drafted him in a Dynasty startup. I didn't love it, but I'm like, who the hell else am I going to draft in 13?
Yeah, and
all the
I
other
mean,
guys are gone.
that's the thing. Like, he's so cheap in Dynasty. It's like, just get him for his production there.
And
But
then
again,
flip him mid-season if he is good,
yeah,
like the redraft crowd. If not, what do you lose? Like, you
and
could probably get him for less than a pair of threes and some junk, probably.
yeah. And McLaurin, there's the contract issue. I mean, McLaurin most likely is active week 1, but there's the contract issue. Anytime a player like that sits out for an extended period of time, you run into the risk of soft tissue injuries. McLaurin has a history of some hamstring injuries in the past. Not guaranteeing that's going to happen, but it's like all of a sudden Debo could find himself being the main target.
Yeah.
Hopefully not, because I don't know if he can sustain that. But
I think Washington's thinking hopefully not. I think that I would bet on Terry getting paid. He's especially how well respected he is. But we've talked about most of the guys. I want to talk about a couple more here. Talked about, I'll skip back to Nick Chubb because you mentioned him before. Like, and we talk about same thing, multi-ligament tears. But that was also 2 seasons ago now where he had that super severe injury. Last year, I don't remember which one knocked him out last year, but I feel like it was another ankle injury or something. What are your thoughts on Nick Chubb? Is that injury from 2 years ago completely sacked him? Does he have a chance to like be better in his second year from that major injury? What are your thoughts on him?
So Nick Chubb basically went, when I look at his situation, he basically went from top of the bucket, top of the barrel efficiency wise to bottom of the barrel. I think Dataroma posted something pretty good on. He was like 35th out of 36.
Out of 32?
Yeah, something like out of 32.
Like, what?
How's that possible? But I mean, that it shouldn't have surprised anybody coming off. He blew out his knee. Same knee where in college he tore everything except for the ACL. So this time he did tear the ACL. He's 28, 29 years old or so. Last year was a foot fracture, and I honestly think it's because he came back and was likely dealing with some compensatory. I mean, he came back pretty quick, to be honest, for that injury. And so it was likely a compensatory injury where it's just loading the foot too much. Now giving, a full extra year away from that initial injury, I don't expect to see him return to his pre-injury, like 2023 or 2022 status from an efficiency standpoint. But even if he's in the middle, it's intriguing enough given Joe Mixon's injury concerns. And I don't even have really good information on Joe Mixon. I know
he's been missing time right now, like with practice.
Well, I think he's back by now.
Oh, is he? He's just come back?
Yeah, he's either back or he's at least out of the boot. He was in a boot for a while.
Yeah.
What I don't have info on is did he actually get surgery or not? There's been some mixed reports on if he had foot surgery or not. But if he did, I've seen some pictures. I've tried to piece it together where he wasn't in a boot for very long. It was maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So if that, it may have been just a couple weeks. So I don't know if he had surgery or not, but Joe Mixon does have that past history of multiple high ankle sprains, multiple low ankle sprains, multiple midfoot sprains. Mixon is really good when he's healthy, and they use him a ton. But again, because of that, any running back that's used a ton is at risk for further injury. So Nick Chubb becomes an intriguing option where year 2 out of that injury, I don't have much concern coming off the foot fracture itself. I kind of view it similar to like Derrick Henry coming off his Jones fracture. I forget what year it was, maybe 2019, 2020 or something like that. I'd have to look back. But I'm really viewing it as year 2 out of ACL plus, and I do think he becomes an intriguing option, especially as a backup or a handcuff option.
Yeah, especially when we saw the willingness to just like feed the starter the ball with Mixon. It's like I think Dameon Pierce is still there. Like there's potential he could be just better than Chubb, but also there's the potential maybe Chubb is, he's a guy who if you're gonna bet on an outlier, Nick Chubb is the kind of guy who it's like, all right, maybe he's the one who can, make some. When we talk about outliers, we talk about all these, how bad this injuries are in terms of like the multi-ligaments. Explain Tyjae Spears. How does he exist without an ACL? What does that even mean? Like, I know that's totally not on the show sheet. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because, this is just popping up into my head now. But how does that even work?
So, it essentially is viewed as an ACL coper. So view the joint as view the tibia and femur basically compressing against each other, and there's been some cartilage degradation where the joint surface, the ACL is key in stabilizing the joint. But if the ACL is gone, obviously you're going to have instability there. But if the joint has solidified and there's enough essentially arthritis to, like, not necessarily arthritis, but the joint has compressed together, that's actually stable itself. And then you rely a lot on your muscles for dynamic stability. So there are ACL copers. You can actually, Heinz Ward was a great example of one. He played, he functioned without an ACL. They're somehow just able to do it because the joint has, it's adapted for that. It's pretty crazy. But for him, again, it comes down to I have huge concussion. Well, I guess I can't say that because I talked about Chris Olave. And it's actually been long enough. So really, concussion history shouldn't be a concern there. But I do have concern, like what happens if he deals with a hamstring strain? What happens if he deals with a groin strain? Because again, those muscles are key.
Yeah.
I believe it's his right knee. I'd have to look at my notes. But if it's to that knee, how's he going to stabilize without an ACL? So then you run into those other concerns, and then altered movement patterns. I think it's why he has such a hard time staying healthy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad I brought him up. All right, let's talk about running backs while we're on running backs, because there's a couple left on the show sheet I wanted to talk to, and we're making pretty good time. We're hitting about our desired goal. So let's talk about Travis Etienne, because he sucked last year, and I was drafting him, and I didn't like it. What the hell happened, man? Is he going to be good again? He used to be good. He's good at Clemson. He's a round one pick. He was good, and it seems like very lately he just hasn't been good. Like how much goes back to that? Obviously he missed his rookie year because he had what we think was a Liz Frank injury. So it's like, what's the deal with Travis Etienne? Is he a injury-prone player? Is he somebody who could bounce back in 2025? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know if his struggles are necessarily related to injury as much as, changing offensive scheme, bad O-line, his specific movement patterns. He has kind of unique movement patterns if you watch him run. I'm sure you've watched
the kind of bow-legged, like he's.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to do it with my arms. I've seen the video. I remember when he was coming out, that was like a highly debated topic, like about his run style and his legs and how he positions like his feet.
And it's not even how he positioned it, it's the angle of his hips. He talked about it. I think he talked about it when he was at Clemson. Just the angle of his femurs have placed him in that position where he has to run like that. But I don't know if he's Brandon Angelo analysis would be someone good to talk about with that, just in terms of like running back processing ability. He hates a strong word, but he hates like DeAndre Swift, I think
he's been on the show and he'll be on again. Speaking of great guests, he does not like DeAndre Swift.
No.
And he was right. He was ahead of everyone else on Swift, because I was like, talk me down on Swift. I love him. He's like, oh.
It's the brain. Like, you look at all these other things. He's athletic, but it's the brain. It's like, I think he views Etienne similarly here. And it's really interesting when you really dive into the numbers. Like, every year at Clemson, he was good, but like every year at Clemson, he regressed. And we're actually seeing this exact same thing in the NFL, where it's like every single season he's regressed. So I was like, why is that? Now, last year he did deal with a hamstring strain, but it didn't keep him out for very long. So it's like, I don't necessarily think his season-long struggles can be tied to injury itself, but maybe the offense. If he's going to have a good year, this is the year where he should have a good year with Liam Cohen. Like, if it doesn't happen this year, we know it's just him.
Oh yeah, we know. And all those running backs are cheap. Like, I want to draft. Like, I like Bigsby because one, he played good in the NFL already. He's the cheapest of all three. So he was easily better than Etienne in like every advanced metric: yards after contact, missed tackles forced. Like, it wasn't even close. The efficiency metrics, the PFF grading, was all like Bigsby good, Etienne bad. So I like Bigsby. I like Etienne too, though. And he's got the pass catching upside. So that's but then Tootin, we talk about the athleticism. What if Etienne does suck, and then Bigsby's just the backup to Tootin? So I'll draft a little bit of all three in best ball. I don't want.
We actually probably should have talked about Bigsby because his numbers. I mean, I'm sure you saw his numbers early in season. He was like top of the charts. up until he suffered a high ankle sprain. And then after that, he struggled. So, and earlier we talked about high ankle sprains, especially for running backs. They do a number on production wise. So Bigsby is one that I'm really interested. Like, honestly, I like
the season
Bigsby
could have been
most.
even better last year, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an intriguing one. He lacks pass catching upside. He's not really used at all as a pass catcher, but underdogs 0.5 PPR, so it's like I like him a little bit more there than like drafters. And we're talking best ball here because it's a little early for redraft. Like, we're not talking ESPN and Yahoo mocks here. We're talking best ball mostly. But I like him in 0.5 PPR. I think he's cheap. I think that could be a good offense, personally. I think the Jags could be a really good offense if Cohen is a legit, play caller and head coach. Obviously, it's still a question mark. Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback. We don't know how much it was just Liam Cohen, being great. But I think they have potential. I think they have a good quarterback in place, good wides. Could be a high-scoring offense. I'll draft both Etienne and Tanks Bigsby in 2025. Let's talk about Javonte Williams, because right now he's looking like a starting running back. How cooked on a scale of 1 to 10 is Javonte Williams? Because it seems like we're still talking about his ACL injury from what was it, 4 years ago now? Like, it seems like he's just got to be cooked, but he's also possibly a starting running back. What are your thoughts on him? And maybe Miles Sanders, who's another guy who I think dealt with injury a little bit.
Yeah. From an injury standpoint, I think Javonte Williams is more cooked than Miles Sanders, to be honest. I just don't know. I have a hard time even saying like, oh, I think Miles Sanders will be running back 1. Deep down, I actually do think Miles Sanders will be. I don't know if you in general even want a Dallas running back this year. Brian Schottenheimer likely runs it. But I could see Miles Sanders outproduce Javonte Williams. I don't think he's going to be the same. I think it would have happened by now, especially behind the Broncos offensive line compared to the Cowboys offensive line. Cowboys offensive line has lost a lot of good players. So I think that's going to be a struggle there. But even last year, I mean, Javonte Williams, 2.9% explosive run rate, 49.6% stuff rate, only 0.13 missed tackles forced per attempt. I think that ACL, so it was ACL, LCL, and PLC, posterior lateral corner. I mean, he blew out his knee.
And he was never like a super athlete to begin with. He was a guy who was like not super.
He's a linebacker.
He's just a bruiser, guy who could break tackles and get through contact. But he doesn't seem to really have any juice left.
Yeah.
I like Miles Sanders. I think he's one of my favorite round 18 guys, just because we talk about guys who, before the season even starts, guys who could go up in value where we're looking at. Could this guy actually be named a week 1 starter for his team? Like, it's possible that Miles Sanders is just better than Javonte in camp, that the preseason games, they split a little time and Sanders looks better. It's possible they just name him the starter, or at least his value goes way up because he starts to look like the starter. So I like him. I don't think we have many other bets like that other than Miles Sanders in round 18. So I'm drafting a good amount of him right now.
Sanders actually looked decent week 18 for Carolina last year, like right at the end of the season. No one remembers it because it was everything, all fantasy was done. I think he put up like 25 points in fantasy.
I think he
5 catches, touchdown, 50-something yards, I think, 40-something yards. He just, rushing-wise, he struggled. But again, Carolina's O-line. I don't think Miles Sanders is necessarily cooked, but I just have a hard time betting on Javonte Williams.
Yeah, week 18 last year, 17 for 66 in a rushing touchdown, and then he had 3 receptions for 50 yards in receiving touchdown too. Yeah, so he had a big game, and he's another guy who I think he's kind of falls into that like DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne bucket where Angelo's gonna be like, yeah, he's blind, but you're choosing between the blind and the cooked. So like, it's Javonte or Miles Sanders. They're gonna have to make a decision either way. Unless it's Jaden Blue season, who knows? But he's not a workhorse guy, Jaden Blue. He's not just the size to be fed. Then again, we have Devon A-Chain, Bucky Irving guys, kind of bucking that trip. I don't think Blue's kind of profiles is that guy who's going to be a workhorse running back. So we're going to see Javonte or Sanders touch the ball this year.
I think that's why people are in on Phil Maffa, but it's like round 7 guy.
Let's see him make the roster first.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Then I'll take a couple shots on Phil Maffa. But as for now, not touching him. All right, so we got one more guy on the list, and we're making basically perfect time. So thank you for that. Thank you again for your time today. It's been great. You've answered a ton, provided a ton of insight. Again, make sure you guys are following him on Twitter at JMThrivePT. You have to be following him. I don't know what you're doing if you're not. So let's talk about one more guy who, again, I'm drafting a good amount of this guy in 2025. A guy who didn't play at all last year. JJ McCarthy. How concerned are we about him coming off, what was it? It wasn't an ACL. I forget what his injury was, but it was like a knee injury, right?
Yeah.
Missed this entire rookie season. Is that a concern at all? Like, or are we drafting JJ McCarthy? I'm drafting. Are you drafting JJ McCarthy in 2025?
Yeah, what's his price right now?
I want to say QB 18 is my guess. Let me look at it. Go to my dog app.
I remember seeing it and thinking like, man, this is actually like, it's cheap enough to where I think the main concern is going to be the fact that he didn't play at all last year, obviously. And you look at rookie quarterback, he's basically entering as a rookie quarterback. But from an injury standpoint, it was a meniscus repair. And I think people are mostly concerned about it because there was a second report. I should have written the timeline on there. I think it was in January, February, where he went back in for a second procedure, but it wasn't actually a procedure. It was more of an exploratory. It sounded like his knee was still dealing with swelling, which can be common after these meniscus repairs. The cartilage just kind of, it remains irritated with load-bearing activity. And we've seen it with Jerick McKinnon. We've seen it with, as a Niners fan, obviously, what sticks out is Javon Kinlaw. We see it with like James Wiseman in the NBA. Basically, these meniscus repairs where swelling persists, and it just takes a while for weight-bearing and load-bearing activity to be able to resume without irritations. But when they went in, the report said there were no other issues. They didn't have to do anything surgically. There was no damage to the cartilage, no damage to the meniscus. And they utilized biologics to basically help him heal from whatever was causing the swelling, which was likely the cartilage. Ever since then, he has still been throwing. He's been progressing in throwing, which I can assume based on videos that I've seen, working on distance, working on volume. And he's now been able to get into the gym and bulk. And Kevin O'Connell recently talked about he's bulked up to where we want him to be. He lost a lot of weight, but that's, again, common because if you're dealing with load-bearing issues, you can't bulk. So he lost a lot of weight. So he's back essentially to where he should be. And he spent all last year working extensively with defensive coordinator Brian Flores. So working through scheme, working through all of the mental side of it, even though the physical aspect he wasn't able to work on. So he's getting all that now, the physical aspect, working on timing, working on throws. He's pretty much cleared by now, I would think, through his throwing program to where I don't think he has any precautions going into camp. So he should be full go from what I've seen. So all that to say, I know that was a ton of information. All that to say, I really don't think you need to be concerned injury-wise on JJ McCarthy. And yeah, I would be buying, especially given top-tier O-line they've built around him, all those moves they made. Very good run game. Aaron Jones returns, Jordan Mason, Mueller, and just the setup. I think the main issue would be if Jordan Addison gets suspended for however many games.
But I think that's only going to be like 3 games. And yeah, you talk about the weapons. Like you look at the ADPs, right? He's got 2 wide receivers in the top 65 picks in Jefferson and Addison. One of them is a top 5 pick in Jefferson. He's got TJ Hawkinson, who's being drafted as like tight end 4, tight end 5. Then we talk about 2 running backs in like the top 110 picks in Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. Like, he's loaded with weapons. We talk about the other quarterbacks in this system. Kirk Cousins, top 12 quarterback in points per game. Sam Darnold, top 12 quarterback in points per game. Joshua Dobbs was the top 12 quarterback in points per game in this system. And McCarthy, I would say, is most like Dobbs in terms of rushing ability. He's not a Konami code, but he has a little bit of mobility. He's a decent rusher, obviously coming off the injury. I think that could limit the way they use him in that. That would be probably, we see a little bit more in year 2 and year 3 as a starter, maybe. Or maybe at least the second half of the season. But I think just based on, QB 18 price, it's really hard to bet against him in that system. So I like JJ McCarthy. that's it as far as players, guys. Thank you again for coming on, Jeff Mueller. Everybody, again, make sure you're following him on Twitter at JMThrivePT. I appreciate you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time. Everybody, have a good one. Take it easy. If you're in that 100-degree heat like I am right now, go stay cool because it's hot out there. All right, guys. Later.
Thank you, everyone.